Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Micflayers podcast, coming to you from the tomb of your favorite dwarf cousin. I'm your host, Conor O'Brien, and joining me as always is my co-host, Mr. Martin O'Dwyer.
I was from Balin's tomb. I love it.
From Balin's tomb.
And they're calling
And
it
they're
to mine.
I love that we're both on the same page.
We've hung out too much.
That might be my favourite opening from any episode we've done so far.
Yeah. That's right up there.
Oh man, how are you today, buddy?
Weirdly enough, I have actually been watching a load of basically highlights of the Lord of the Rings recently, because I went down to watching people watch Lord of the Rings for the first time, rabbit hole again. That's
always a joy.
I love it, man. I just love it because it's always like, so it always starts off with like in the first like whatever video in the series, they're like, so who's this Bomdor and is that dumb and Galadalf, and then by the end of it they're like, throw it in the fire, Frodo.
Yeah, I think I've watched a handful of people watch it. Like, I'm honestly, do you know what? Occasionally, I'll watch people on YouTube watch again. I'm really into that whole reaction for the first time thing, and particularly when it's something I've seen a million times. I do it for Korra the whole time. I do it for Star Wars. I do it for Lord of the Rings. I do it for a bunch of different stuff. Game of Thrones is great because it's just so much shock value.
I can't watch anything Game of Thrones related anymore. I swear to God, I don't know. I think like season 8 was so bad that it just killed my appetite for the show.
Do you know what? I have gone back and watched it all again after season 8 aired, and the early seasons are still really good. You kind of got to put out of your mind the fact that it's just going to the garbage dump. The thing is, it's interesting how, because it is so fundamentally bad. I think it's very interesting to like look at it and be like, okay, I think the fans perpetuated the hate for season 8 a little bit, and that's probably true to a degree. But I watch, Natalie Gold. She does a reaction YouTube channel. She watched all of Game of Thrones recently, and it's like you can watch her earlier episodes, and she's so enthusiastic. Well, maybe like season 2 and 3, because season 1's a bit of a starter, But season 2 and 3, she's so enthusiastic, and you can watch it, and it hits like season 5, and she's like, "This is great." And season 6 is like, "Okay, that's good. Yeah, I like that." And season 7's like, "Right, okay." And then season 8 is like, "What just happened?" And she has, and like as someone who wasn't deep in the Twitter trenches and the Reddit forums and stuff when the season aired, she's someone who doesn't have that echo chamber of hate just bouncing back and forth, and she still thought it was the same thing. So I'm like, yeah, I still love the early seasons. I still think that world building wise, there's some fucking gold, and I think the show, you cannot deny the show did some amazing stuff with like costumes and effects and actors and stuff. There's brilliant stuff in there.
There was never a question over like the costuming or the effects, or like the dragons alone are a technical marvel. I was working nights when all that was still coming out. So like what would happen is it would come out during the night. I would be like, right, I'd get home at like 8 o'clock, or I'd get home at like 9 o'clock, and I will sit down with no phone away, off, like everything, just me in the episode. So I never saw anyone's thoughts about it until after I had watched the episode myself. So I still thought it was bollocks. I thought it was so bollocks.
I do think that season, the biggest crime of season 8, again, it's very apparent when you watch it back again. I think the first time it's all glamour, and you don't like. I think the first time I watched through any of the seasons, I enjoy them at least to a degree, because I'm like, I don't care. I'm getting Game of Thrones. This is new Game of Thrones content. I'll take it. But when we watch through a second time, there's like a notable drop off in season 6. I want to say, because at that point is when the books stop.
Yep.
And from then on, it's just it's weirdly enough, it's D&D, David and Dan, isn't it?
Yeah, Benioff and it's Benioff and Weiss, isn't it?
Weiss, yeah. And it's them, like, they obviously have notes from George.
I thought you were going to say strokes. Have no idea what they're doing, and I was like,
that's the thing. I think, like, to their credit, I think they adapted the early seasons really, really well. I think honestly that's some flawless television right there. But when it comes to
there were some issues I had with stuff with like certain character lines and plot lines that were just completely left out, and other things like that. And like I always found they seemed to play down the magic a lot. Like there'd be other kind of magical stuff going on that would, like, you could really see it when they took over from, and they didn't have the books to lean on, that they had like no interest in going into any of the magic or anything like that, because it all just disappears as soon as they take over. Like all the wolves die. Well, not all the, like, nearly all, like all like pretty much all the wolves.
The giants get killed.
The giants get killed. Like the Red Woman just disappears entirely. And she's in it like twice. And then like, now admittedly there's the Night King and the zombies and all that stuff, but like, yeah, they just clearly
that was kind of inescapable, really.
Yeah, but they just clearly had no interest in like going into like the background magical lore and all of the really cool stuff. Like read A Song of Ice and Fire. Do it. It's really good.
Yeah, I will admit I have not read the books. I started reading the first one.
That was a general message to the audience, Connor, not just you, but yeah.
No, I know, yeah. But I mean, like, I started reading the books, and I kind of got distracted, as I tend to do. But I will go back to them. But like, it really, I don't know. Part of me wonders, and I suppose we can't really know for sure because George is still writing some of the late stuff and still resolving a lot of those plot lines. Part of me wonders if maybe the fan base, being as broad and as huge and as passionate as they are, have surpassed even Martin, to the point where like their fan theories and the connections that they've made and stuff like that, and the theories they have, go beyond even what George actually has planned for the final books. Like,
yeah, but here's
the whole thing.
They'll go beyond, but they won't make sense. Like with George R. Martin, like even though there might be things out there that will go beyond what he might think of, what he will think of will make sense. It will line up with the foreshadowing and the way everything goes, and it will be satisfying. Whereas there's someone who legitimately believes that there's people out there. There's a very famous theory on the Song of Ice and Fire Reddit, where Roose Bolton is the father of Ramsay. He's a vampire. He's a skin-changing vampire, and that's why his sigil is the Flayed Man, because he flays people and takes their skin so he can assume a different identity as time goes on.
That's a bit of a stretch, all right, yeah.
Yeah. yeah, Connor, that's fair. But yeah, no.
Well, I'm talking more about the slightly more grounded ones, where like people predict that John is Azor Ahai and stuff like that, and the ones that like there seems to be good setup for it, but I mean, like, to show, like you said, the Azor Ahai thing is kind of a prophecy and a retelling of an old. It's a cyclical, reoccurring prophecy like kind of
Jesus.
situation.
It's like Jesus. It's like Jesus.
I mean, yeah. Any sort of chosen one thing has a lot of Jesus kind of similarity to it, but in this case, like, there was so much building to that, I felt, and so much that very much like if you look at the people's theories on that,
and if you read
compare the books and the lore and the show, and and that lines up very nicely. And then it kind of seemed, and with prophecies and stuff being semi-magical in their nature, that you're right in what you're saying about the magic kind of dropping off in the show, because that would have been a very interesting thing for the Red Lady to be like, hey, John, you're Azor Ahai, you're my people's, my religion's Jesus, essentially. We foretold your coming and the fact that you would kill the Night King and stuff like that. And then, but I mean, if the books, I would be disappointed if the books don't follow through with that, because I mean, like, but it's just, again, that's so blatant that,
and like,
I don't know.
Talking about characters they left, Lady Stoneheart is one of the coolest characters in A Song of Ice and Fire, in my opinion.
When Catelyn dies and is resurrected,
but she's resurrected like days later, and like,
she was cold,
she's lost like a shit. She's lost a ton of her humanity.
We're at 10 minutes in.
She's basically lost like all of her humanity. She's just like incredibly cold and like cruel. Vengeful. Almost. She can't speak, because when they slit her throat, they like went basically all the way through her voice box as well. So like, she like sits at the table with the Brotherhood Without Banners, and like they bring Lannisters into her, and I think, or there might have been people who even fought under like Rob's banner, but then like deserted or after he lost.
Right. Yeah.
And like, she just like hangs people for left, right, and center, and like to speak, she like clamps her hand over the wound on her throat, like presses the flesh together, and like speaks, and she like she has Rob's iron crown, the one with all, the one that's all the sword points, and she just like has it sitting in front of her all the time, and like she picks it up and like touches the sword points and stuff, and she like looks like, apparently she looks like half dead already, and she's just like a walking corpse who was like just going around murdering anyone who had anything to do with the Lannisters who passes through their territory.
Was it Taurus of Myr that brought her back?
No, it wasn't. It was Dondarrion.
Oh, really? Okay. In the show, he never resurrects anybody, but he is resurrected himself.
It's been literal years at this stage since I read. I think that's a Storm. No, that's a Feast for Crows. I think it's been literal years since I read a Feast for Crows by now. But like, I'm fairly sure it's Dondarrion finds her body washed up because they threw her into the river after they killed her. To like mock the
she'd flow down river towards the
the Tully burial ritual is that they put them in the boat and send them off down the river, and then they shoot a flaming bow, an arrow into the bow, and like Viking funeral style basically. So they just stripped her body naked and dumped her into the river to mock their burial rituals, and then like so she like washes up after being like fed on by animals and stuff for like a few days, and I think it's Thoros and Beric find her, and Thoros says no, it's been too long, we can't bring her back, and Dondarrion gets down and breathes the fire into her and brings her back, and she's now just this like vengeful wraith killing anyone who had anything to do with her son's death.
Yeah, it's a shame that so much got, and it's like loads of stuff like do you know what? Okay, and we will talk about D&D eventually in this podcast.
Welcome to the Valerian Steel podcast.
But okay, so Game of Thrones itself, the show itself, I wouldn't say it's the most complicated, but there is a lot of characters, a lot of moving parts. So I mean, like if you're someone who maybe isn't used, particularly if you're not used to fantasy or whatever, learning a lot of the names might be a little bit over your head and stuff, and you might call Jamie the blonde Lannister guy. You know, he lost his hand, that fella. But you know the characters, and it's fair enough. The show is a very dumbed down is probably a bad way, but simplified version of what happens in the books, because again they take out certain arcs. They're like the whole succession thing with Daenerys. Daenerys isn't even the only Targaryen on the playing field. There's a young Griff. There's a whole plotline there, and Varys serves him and is trying to get him back on the throne. And there's a whole thing where he may or may not actually be a Targaryen, but they're trying to pretend like he is and stuff. And then there's like a whole thing where after Baelish gets Sansa out of King's Landing, he like hides her somewhere and then finds this other girl and makes her pose as Sansa. And there's way more moving parts. And this is a bit of a tangent. It actually kind of makes me worried for the upcoming Wheel of Time show, because I know Game of Thrones is complicated. Wheel of Time has like hundreds of characters and 14 books that are all like 800 pages each. And I'm not super familiar with it, but I'm looking forward to it. And it's supposedly people are talking about it like it's maybe going to be the next Game of Thrones. Now, I think other than the fact that it's a big popular fantasy series, a lot of cool characters and stuff like that, I think a lot of how they do the show in terms of like how they direct it and film it and stuff like that will determine whether or not it's the next Game of Thrones. But in terms of the plot alone and adapting that for screen, I don't know. That's an undertaking, you know. That's an adaptation that book fans are probably going to hate, more so than book fans that hate Game of Thrones, the show.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I know. Like, there's a lot of stuff. It's actually such a really fucking exciting time for like fantasy shows coming up, because we've got the Amazon Lord of the Rings show coming out. There's the Wheel of Time show coming out. Witcher season 2 comes out in December. We've got the Critical Role Legend of Vox Machina comes out in January.
Yeah, God, for between now and the early next year, we have a good few things.
That's not even throwing out the 3 Marvel movies that are coming between now and New Year. Like,
yeah. What do we have between now and New Year? We have Eternals.
Eternals is the next one. Then I believe it's Spider-Man No Way Home. Doctor Strange. Sorry, there's 2 before New Year, and then there's one in, I think it's either January or March. And that's Doctor
I think
Strange
it's March. That's Doctor Strange. I think that's March. Yeah.
And like Blade is next year, I think, as well, which I cannot wait.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting.
It's a great time to be a fan of fantasy.
It's great. It's a great time to be a fan of anything, really. Just in general, like to kind of talk about in a very broad stroke, in terms of like streaming services and what things like GoFundMe and all these other things where people can raise money to make their own shows that wouldn't normally get made by a studio, and for it seems like an awful lot like a lot of the streaming services are kind of hunting for good shows. You saw like Netflix picked up Shadow and Bone, which was okay. I thought it was a decent enough show. And Lock and Key as well. Like, you know, Netflix has always been good for that. Other platforms are also kind of doing the same thing where they're looking for interesting. You have The Boys on Netflix, which is an adaptation of the comic book. Yeah, I mean, like it's very much, it's a good time, I think, to be maybe the underdog creator who wrote a book or a comic or something that has popularity but in a very niche circle, because they're the circles that executives and stuff are now hunting through, going, can we make this into a multi-billion-dollar show and put it exclusively on our platform and attract a bunch of new people that way? And is it a capitalist cash grab? Absolutely. But will it sate my my nerdiness, my nerdy desires? Sure, absolutely.
Will it impact my bank balance when they release all the merch? For certain.
Absolutely, absolutely. Martin,
yes.
We're like 15 minutes into the podcast, and
we've covered a lot, man. We covered Game of Thrones. We covered mostly Game of Thrones.
We covered streaming platforms, the proliferation of streaming services, and
streaming wars,
pay subscriptions and stuff like that.
Upcoming MCU movies.
Upcoming MCU. Martin, today we are talking about something, a really fun topic, death itself.
Yeah.
So we're talking about death in D&D. Whether it's your characters, your NPCs, your campaign sometimes.
Your bosses.
Your bosses. Death is kind of the main threat, really, for players. And to a degree, DMs as well. I think, you know, you want some certain NPCs, certain bad guys to stay alive long enough for them to be interesting and have recurring threats and stuff like that. So you and I both DM our own games. Martin, have you ever killed a player character in game, even temporarily, even if they were revived or something like that?
Yeah, not in the traditional way it was. Well, actually, no, I suppose it wasn't the traditional way, but it was. I collaborated with a player who just wasn't having fun playing D&D anymore. It was too much of like a commitment for him, so he wanted to leave. And yeah, I was sad with it, but like I was like, all right, let's have fun. How do you want to leave? And he was like, make it as traumatic for the others as possible. I was like, okay, are you going to tell your...
he really didn't like playing D&D.
No. He just wanted to really mess with the other players because they had no idea he was going to quit.
Okay.
And like, also worth pointing out, one of the other players is his significant other, who he had also not told about this.
Okay.
And so we're playing a game anyway, and I set it up. I wanted it to be a bit of a mousetrap or bait and switch kind of a situation. So I set up a mission for them, where basically the town civil engineers came to them going, look, we've been working on this. For reference, the bad guys attacked the city, caused a huge explosion that's damaged certain parts of the city. So the civil engineers are going in. It's like there's this like giant tunnel that's all blocked by this like huge chunk of boulder that got launched by the explosion. They're like, we're trying to move this, but every time we try and move this, stuff keeps attacking us. Can you go down there and clear the sewer? And my players are like, this is like, what? Wait, you want us to do this? This is like beneath us. And I was like, I had the king of that city be like, please, consider it a personal favor for me. And they were like, okay, that's the only reason we're doing this though. We ain't we're not going down there to kill rats.
I was going to say, were they high enough levels at this point?
They were like,
we're a rat catcher.
They were like level 7.
Get a little big for their boots of haste, aren't they?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Boots of growth, not boots of hates. But yeah, anyway, they went down into the sewer, and I did
it. Cast in large on their egos now.
I did a big like dungeon crawl kind of thing where jump piece by piece, and at one point they cast detect magic and in a certain corridor, and they found a door disguised by basically by, I think it was like major image or something, but like basically a secret passageway disguised by an illusion. They dispelled the illusion, went into the secret passageway, and they find this tunnel that leads along this the exact same length of the dungeon that they've been traveling, and has like viewports interspersed all around. They're like, this is weird. Why would someone built this? Why? And then they like go into the room. They find it actually kicks out into the room that they needed to find, which was the room with the big the boulder blocking the thing. So they, if I remember right, I think my druid turned into a giant ape and pulled the boulder out of the tunnel. And as she did, an Otiog attacked them, because sewers.
Of course.
But the Otiog was merely a distraction. So they murdered the crap out of the Otiog in like 2 turns, because they were level 7. And 2 rogues, a druid, and a sorcerer. So damage is not in short supply. But so they murdered the crap out of the Otiog. But then a Drow Shadowblade appeared. And Drow Shadowblades are one of my very favourite stat blocks now, because they're just so damn cool. They can like create these like columns of darkness that they can detonate for like a bunch of necrotic damage. They have like a shadow sword, and they can do the Shadow Monk shadow teleport thing as well. But when they do it, they have advantage on an attack roll coming out of the shadows.
Oh, that's the exact same as Shadow Monk.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I haven't actually played a Shadow Monk. I just know they're dope.
Yeah, they are. It's probably one of the favourite monk classes. Sorry, go on.
But yeah, basically, I had him just focus it was my halfling rogue. Had him focus the halfling rogue the entire fight, like completely ignored everyone else. Only attacked them if they got directly in the way. And at one point, the druid, still as a giant ape, picked up the giant boulder she'd pulled out and threw it at the Shadowblade, and it hit him, and it was a big rock and did a fair amount of damage. And you were like, yeah! But a Shadowblade was way higher CR than they were capable of, I think. And he just like shrugged the damage off, barely did anything to him, and was like, oh, awesome, because you threw that boulder, there is now a shadow cast over him from its size. And he used the shadow cast by the boulder to teleport out of that corner all the way across the room behind the rogue, came out of shadows and just stab, basically instantly KO'd him, and then kicked his unconscious body through a big shadowy darkness portal and disappeared. And that's how the session ended.
So, just so I understand, he was obviously present at the session.
Yeah.
Knowing full well that you were going to kill him in
we had planned this. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And yeah, the session ended and everyone was like, what the fuck, we've got to save Osram. And then I was like, do you want to tell him? Or will I? And he was like, guys, I have something I need to tell you. And I don't think I'll ever forget the look on his partner's face. she's like,
yeah, I could understand not letting...
You didn't tell me?
I could understand not telling like the other players, but your own partner. Like if you're planning on leaving the group, like if I was playing in the game or Tower or something like that, I'd probably tell her when I decided I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
Hey, in a couple of weeks I'm probably going to leave. Martin's going to write me out of the story or something like that. You know, it'd be really weird if I waited till the night of and then was like, oh yeah, so see the way I'm dead now? That means I'm leaving.
Yeah, that was basically what he did, because he wanted it, as he said, he wanted it to be as traumatic as possible. So we didn't warn anyone or go like, guys, this is going to be a special session tonight. But I did have him reappear then. Jeez, that was probably like 2 years ago at this stage when he left. Maybe more.
You were saying you had him come back as like an undead assassin.
Yeah, I revived him as an undead with basically a level 11 thief rogue stat block with all his player gear.
Nice.
And
so he had like some pretty cool items.
Yeah, and they all wore, and all the assassins wore these masks that you had to like full on like peel off their face to actually see what their face looked like. Right. Except the only thing they could see was his eyes, and I said his eyes looked like, you know, like I think it's the Romero zombie movies when someone zombifies, like their eyes still look like their eyes, but they're all like crazy red, cracked out veins and bloodshot.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, so 28 days later zombies. Their eyes, the rage virus, they go all crazy red.
Oh yeah, they full all the vessels burst and everything. Yeah.
Or actually, if you remember what the Mountain's eyes looked like at the end of Game of Thrones, just because we were talking about there, his eyes sort of like that. That's all they could see, so they couldn't even tell it was their friend looking at the eyes. So like they go through it all, and like the whole fight, my rogue is dueling this other rogue on a rooftop, because I had two assassins come at. They were in an alleyway that had like, it was like a 4-way intersection in a busy district. So they were up here. I had a thug walk down and stop them and talk to them, and as they were talking to the thug, 2 assassins came from either side, and then I had their revived friend about 80 feet back on top of a roof with a longbow.
Jeez.
And yeah, just because I knew they could handle it because they have guns and they have
Yeah.
guns and they have magic and they have Mandroy, who's just a force of sheer chaos. But yeah, they basically went through the whole fight, nice and like really fun combat, close, lots of stuff going on, lots of damage done. But at the end, then my rogue Erandir was like, I want to search the bodies and look for that cash. And I was like, yeah, no problem. You search for the bodies. And I was like, what did you roll? He rolled like crazy high because he's rogues, you know. And I was like, all right, you pull the mask off. I was like, oh, by the way, you find X amount of gold, X amount of gold. It's like you find this black iron rapier that the point has been twisted, and it looks like there's a lot of dried blood in all the grooves. And you also find this black. It was a sharp. Sorry, it was this black sharp bow with all these like iron, thorn-like appendages coming out of the thing, which is exactly how I described Ollieman's gear previously.
When he got it.
Still didn't twig it.
This is the one of the edgiest character descriptions ever, though. So let's try that out there.
Yeah. It's called the Leeching Blade and the Wounding Sharpo.
I've got this rapier, but it's like twisted and black and dark. And also I got this bow, but it's got like thorns and it's twisted and it's black and it's dark.
It's a necrotic rapier. And I said it's twisted so that like when you stab someone with it, the wound can't be stitched.
I mean, you're not making a good case against the angstiness or the edginess of this.
It's edgy. But yeah, basically he then like pulled the mask off, and I was like, yeah, you see a halfling, and it described exactly as Ronald and I was like, and you realize it's your friend Osram. And that was just, I just instantly felt the mood go like hit the floor, and I was like, oh, I feel bad. This is exactly what I wanted. But then, they defeated him. They had a really nice funeral for him. His spirit came back, said goodbye. I went, oh, by the way, I have a creative, useful stuff I was keeping for the campaign for the rest of the fight, like under my bed back in our house in this city. I'm not using it anymore. I hope it helps you with your journey. And then they kind of went and basically got like a gift from the afterlife from him, and it was like, I think I gave him like, it was like 2 greater healing potions, 2 regular healing potions, and I think it was 3 vials of wyvern poison.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's a nice ending to an otherwise fairly shocking and twisted.
I knew I had to give him a nice ending because everything else I did was so horrible. I had to give them an ending that would equivalently ease my guilt.
Yeah. Honestly, that's really good. I haven't had the opportunity. Well, no, actually, that's not true. I have. Because you're talking about when you brought him back as a corrupted assassin and stuff like that. I had the most unexpected series of events. We talked about the podcast before, but I've had the most unexpected series of events with Wabu in our current campaign.
Yeah.
Because to brush through things as fast as possible, there was a battle you guys had with some Darrow in the Underdark. And you killed all the kind of basic Darrow relatively fast. You were like level 3, I think, at this point, just level 3.
Yeah.
And you killed all the basic Darrow, and there was one guy left, and he was a savant, so he had a few spells. One of the spells he had was Lightning Bolt, and he looked around. He's like, okay, I need to at that point, I'm not thinking how is he going to win this fight because I know he won't win the fight. But I'm like, okay, so like 1 on 4. How does he get out of here? Like, what does he do that will get him out of here alive? Because that's his goal right now. And I looked around and I'm like, okay, Wabu, who was the barbarian turtle that's in the party, played by Mike, and then an NPC named Flint, who was a Shadowkai Ranger, I think I made him.
Yeah, he was a Ranger.
And he was, so I was like, okay, those 2 are in a line right now, and I've lightning bolt, so this is going to happen. So he lightning bolts the 2 of them. They both get hit. It knocks them both unconscious because it was a pretty high roll. They're both unconscious. Now it's just you, the other human barbarian, and also a halfling warlock. And you both go, all right, let's get this guy. So I think you hit him a couple of times, and on the next turn, it's like his turn. I'm looking at his health points, and I'm like, he will not last another round. So he could lightning bolt you again. It would do some damage, and you have to spend some hit dice after the fight or something like that. But what's going to get him out of here alive? He has sleep, and he knows you guys have taken some hits in the fight. So he used a 3rd level spell, I think it was, to cast sleep. And I roll it for both of you. Or I roll all the dice, and it gets you both and puts you to sleep. And I go, cool. And he uses the rest of his movement just to run out of the place and leave you guys there. Unfortunately, I was still stuck in initiative. You guys are asleep. There's no one to run over and give medical
Yeah.
attention to the other two, and I think they'd maybe failed one each at this point potentially. Um, and I'm like, okay, and you guys are asleep for like a minute or 10 minutes or something like that. So I'm like, we're just gonna run rounds until
It's sleep is a
they
minute.
die or
So
don't die.
we were literally did 10. We just did 10 rounds of death saves.
Yeah.
Just to see.
And I just had I would go, all right, Mike, you roll for Wabu, and then I roll for Flint, and you roll for Wabu, and we had a bad series of rolls, and both of them died. And Flint was an NPC, so like I wanted to maybe do more with him, but I'm like, okay, he died though. That's what happens. That's the way the dice get you. And then Wabu died, and it's the first time killing Mike in a campaign. So and I knew he really wanted to play Wabu, and it's only level 3,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, okay. Well, look, it sucks, but here's how it is, you know. And he was okay with it. To be fair, I think he was disappointed naturally, but he was okay with it. And we talked a little bit, and I was like, oh, you can make a new character, or whatever, blah blah blah. Eventually, we kind of fell on. He made a temporary character. And I wanted to present a couple of different opportunities for how he could potentially come back if you guys are willing to go on certain missions. So one of these missions was there was kind of two options you could do here in the Underdark, and you were down deep enough that it would have taken you forever to get back with his body. You would have needed a very high level caster that can do like raise dead or something like that, because the 10-day thing definitely would have applied. If not a proper resurrection or something
We
like
also
that, you know.
definitely didn't have the gold for the material components for a raised dead.
No, absolutely not. So I put two opportunities in front of you. One was that you can go to this palace, this Merid palace, owned by a guy named Sakir. Sakir is a very powerful Merid, and he says, "Hey, look, I got some jobs I could use doing down here in your Underdark. If you can go and do these jobs for me, I'll bring your friend back." And you guys were like, "Okay," but this guy was super sketchy, and he was definitely not a good person.
Yeah.
The other option was that, and I put this in front of you, but none of you bit on it, which I was a little disappointed about it. But there was this. One of the things was you had to go to a Darrow hideout, and when you got there, one of the places you looked into was like this pyramid, and in the pyramid there was essentially a Lazarus Pit, like in Batman. And they actually took the Darrow guys you killed, and they put them in there, and they woke them up, and they were a little bit not right, but they were alive and presumably would come back around after a while. And I kind of hoped that you guys would be like, oh, we can just drop Wabu into that, and then we don't need to do this fucking guy's jobs or whatever. I knew, and you guys didn't know this, but I knew that if you drop Wabu in, he does come back to life, but he becomes a Darrow.
Oh, I can't. I think you've probably taught me that before, but I forgot. But jeez, oh my god, I think I don't. Okay, I don't think Mike would have been very upset, but he would have lost his shit.
I think everyone would have lost their minds in like a good way, hopefully.
I would have said nothing for 4 seconds and then dropped on the floor laughing.
Yeah, so the plan was, I'm like, here's a resurrection pool, but the thing is, it's a resurrection pool given to them by their mad demon god, and it's for reviving Darrow. So if you put a person in there, they'll come back to life, but they'll be a Darrow. And I would have literally gone into D&D Beyond or whatever, or onto Mike's sheet. I can't remember if we were playing digitally or using D&D Beyond yet.
We were. We started using it for the second campaign.
Okay, and yeah, we were on D&D Beyond, and I would have gone in, clicked edit, changed Mike's thing. I don't think you can play Darrow, but I would have made him like a deep gnome as an alternative or something like that. I would have gone, yeah, you're a Darrow now, and he would have had all his faculties. He still would have been Wabu, and I wouldn't have changed any of his stats or anything like that. I would have just said, yeah, you're a Darrow, so your racial abilities are now Darrow racial abilities. And yeah, you might need to find a way to reverse that. And I thought that could be a super. And I would have allowed it eventually. He would have to find someone who can cast wish or do this or whatever. And that was really, really interesting. Unfortunately, you didn't bite on that one. You did the other mission for Sakir. Sakir brought him back, but Sakir did a thing. And to talk about Game of Thrones again, Sakir did a thing where, you know, when Jon came back from the dead, he was resurrected, but he was kind of he was almost like the Lord of Light's equivalent to what the Whites are. He was like a fire white.
I was going to say, yeah, that's literally what I was going to say. Like the people who are resurrected, like, are often called fire whites, as opposed to the guys who are resurrected by the Night King.
Yeah, exactly. So they're not quite themselves. They're particularly like Beric Dondarrion talks a lot about how he's been brought back 5, 6, 7 times, and every time he's a little less himself, because you lose a fragment every now and again. And what Sakir did is when he brought him back, I'm like, yeah, you're alive. His type was undead, um, and he also and he looked sickly and everything. He wasn't healed up properly. His body still looked kind of grey and slightly dead.
Still a big crazy lightning bolt scar from what killed him as well.
On the blast, yeah. And then over time, he kind of learned that from a couple of clerics and a couple of other people who examined him, he did not have a soul. His soul was not present in his body. Something else was present there that was acting like him, but it wasn't him. And also, eventually he learned that what he is he's a shade, and he is like a shadow of a soul. He's an imitation of a soul. Shades cannot grow or evolve or kind of become different or new. They are just he's a snapshot of who Wabu was in the moment he died, and he will only ever be that. And as a result, when he was raging and angry and cutting people down, so I'm like, you will only, as long as you are in this form, as long as you are a shade like this, and the shade inhabits your body instead of an actual soul, you can only ever be that. You'll only ever be angry and hate-filled and aggressive. And to his credit, he played it very well for a while.
Yeah, he did.
And then we had a whole thing where that Wabu kind of secretly, myself and Mike were texting, and he had a whole dialogue where he was sending messages back and forth between him and the bad guy. And he full on. I tempted him at first, and I'm like, he might go for this, but he might not. And he full on turned on you. I'll show you the messages on the campaign. It's done someday. He full on turned on you guys. He's like, and when you would kill some people, he would immediately go to his room, send a message to the bad guy, and be like, hey, your undead army, I know where there's some dead bodies. And then he'd send him there to pick up the bodies and stuff like that. Yeah, it was mad. And that went on for a couple of months. And eventually you guys found a high-level cleric. She tried to cast True Resurrection on him. And she had his body, and she was hoping it would just put his soul back into him. And then he'd heal up gradually over time. But because she didn't realize there was a shade in the body already inhabiting it, the soul can't do that, so it kind of ricocheted and then just duplicated the second body that was healthy and new. But it was Wabu from the moment he died. So I'm like, okay, you're now that new, fresh, alive Wabu. The last thing you remember is a big flash of lightning and nothing, and the next thing you know, you wake up on the slab of stone. And he's like, that's like months ago that happened. I'm like, yeah, you don't remember anything that happened for the last few months. And then I took over the other Wabu, who woke up from the ritual, saw that they had created a new, fresh, healthy Wabu, and immediately thought, like, you fuckers, you weren't trying to help me at all. You were just trying to get him back. You're not going to fix me or cure me. You're just trying to get your friend back, and I'm just disposable. So he immediately, attacked a couple people, fled the castle, and has become one of the recurring baddies of the campaign since.
Yeah, he really showed up recently as well. Sporting, he's been juicing. He's been juicing since we last saw him.
He's been juicing some dark magic.
He's been juicing and also welding. It looks like he's just got loads of random pieces of metal stuck into him.
Yeah, I kind of it's a little bit like if you Lord of the Rings or like The Hobbit, where a lot of the orcs just have metal embedded in them, which makes no sense really, and a living person wouldn't be able to do that, but he's not a living person. So yeah, jot as much metal in there as you need. You need a new shoulder spike, just jam it on in there,
Yeah, jeez, right. I'm really looking forward to fighting him. I really want to fight them. I really, really, really want to fight them. Him and Strauss. Yeah. I'm gonna do some horrible shit to Strauss when I kill him. Horrible. I've been planning it for months, Connor.
Strauss, for those who are wondering, Strauss is the overarching elf necromancer in the campaign, he showed up a few times early on. He tricked you guys a couple times, and now he's in the wind, but you guys know he's out there planning some stuff.
And
there's another death.
2 of his fingers.
Sorry. You do. You cut off a couple of his fingers. There is a couple things or another death I want to bring up that is yours, because I killed you in campaign 1.
Yes. You killed me twice, actually.
I think there was a few revivifies cast over the course of that campaign.
Oh yeah, no, you I think you killed everyone but Mike in that campaign.
That's true, actually. Yeah. I think
at one point
or another.
This campaign.
Yeah, I killed you Here's the thing.
It was a story death.
It was the story death. You didn't know that, though.
Yeah, and I distinctly remember going, "You are hard to kill."
It was a planned death. I knew going into that session. So you guys were like defending a cathedral, which is the head of your order. You know, it's the home of your order of paladins from a huge demon and undead attack. Like massive. It like attacked the whole island that the thing was on. And there was a fight down with the water, and there was a dual battles going on, and then you had to race back because the main bad guy.
I'm actually going to see if I can find my notes from that.
Okay, I'll keep going. So there was a dual battle going on. Martin was fighting down by the water. The cathedral was further inland. Eventually, the fight by the water is where the bad guy first showed himself. They engaged him and they killed him in his demon form. And then when his demon form cracked open, it revealed that there was an elf inside of it, like wearing like an exoskeleton, who leapt out and stabbed Eru through the chest. And then flew off back to the castle and was like, "You're, come follow me," or whatever. I forget. He said something like threatening, and then he flew off to the castle, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you're like sick adopted dwarf father back at the castle. Well, I'm gonna go kill him now. So you better try and stop me, or whatever." And it was a race back to the castle, which was like one of the tensest moments in all of campaign 1. And you followed him there, and then he like held your dwarven father up, like flying above a tower, and you were flying in front of him, and he just dropped him. He just let him go, and you had to fly after him. And I think there was an amazing moment where Sage, the monk, the elemental monk, ran up the tower.
Yeah. She like Barry Allen her way up the tower.
Yeah,
as he's
ran
falling
straight up. And then she, like, I think not Thorn Whip, but she, like, caught him or something with, like, a water whip.
She, like, jumped off the building and caught him, and then did, like, control water from, like, a water pool that was in the area they were in. And, like,
I think she used her monk.
Elemental stuff, yeah.
Snowfall, yeah.
And did the Avatar thing where they pull, like, the spout of water up when they're falling so that their momentum is slowed.
Yeah.
I actually have my notes from my death here.
Read it out. Let's go.
I also, funnily enough, I actually, one of the first pages I opened, I have also your description of the afterlife that my character saw as well.
Yes. So go on. So try and pick up about the point that Sage, if you can find it out, where Sage saves your dad and Gareth.
Yeah, Gareth.
Spears you into the ground from 200 feet up.
Yeah, cool. So I've got Eru and Gareth continue their duel. Gareth swings at Eru, basically missing him and cutting some of his black hair. As the sword passes by, Eru notices how familiar it seems. Gareth's second swing hits the mark and Eru falls unconscious and begins to drop, trailing smoke behind him. As he falls, Gareth strikes him again. Eru is now at death's door. Sage sees Eru falling and tries to catch him, like she did with Oren. Sage catches Eru, but Gareth dives down to them, knocking Sage unconscious before stabbing Eru through the heart and driving him into the floor of the training grounds, killing him. Gareth, believing his work to be done and heavily wounded, quickly tries to make his retreat. Yeah.
So you were falling, already dead in the descent, and he followed you down and used his full falling momentum to spear you with this +3 greatsword called Judgment.
I missed that.
Killed you, but again, I knew you were underpowered to fight him, and I had planned on it.
He was like a 20th level Oathbreaker, wasn't he?
Something akin to. I had a stat block for him, but yeah, he was something akin to that.
Because I remember at one point I was like, lay on hands, 20 health, and he was like, lay on hands, 40 health.
Yeah, and you guys, he killed you.
Yeah.
And then like you did not know this going into the session. I did not tell you I was going to do this.
No.
I'm like, I purposely wanted to put the fear of God into you.
You did.
And I did. And I think you were shocked, but I think you also. I think honestly, do you know what? I think, and we'll come back onto why this is important later, but I think that you were okay with it because the drama of the situation justified it.
Yeah.
If I had, it's the same idea of if you walk into a town and I'm like, Eru, a meteorite falls from space and pierces your head, you take 80 d10 damage or something like that.
Jesus.
You'd be like, what the hell was that? But the fact that you fought an amazing fight,
Yeah.
there was a dramatic race back to the cathedral. There was a dramatic, like, he was holding his action to release your dad, and you were like there, and it was a standoff, and then he did, and you went after your dad, and then Sage saved him, but like the most clutch moment ever. She saved him from the fall damage, and I think what she did was she used her slow fall and stuff, and then she's like, "Look, is there a way I can take all of that damage and give him none of it?" And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I'll give you his as well." And she's like, "Yeah, sure, I'll take all of it. I don't care." And he took no damage because she broke his fall.
Yeah.
And then you fought him, and then he knocked you unconscious and killed you, and the drama of the situation, I think, sold it really. And then I think you were okay with it. And then what happened was you got onto you had a
you kept this. You did not to use a wrestling term. You did not break kayfabe for a good 15 minutes because we had to resolve the rest of the battle, and then because he fled after that, and then
he flew away, and I was measuring round to round how far he flew.
And then our archer rogue and our monk, who was a wood elf with a longbow, both of them just standing on top of a spaceship shooting arrows at this guy as he's flying away trying to kill him, and they did get him in the end.
What happened was the island was collapsing. So you guys have this not, it's not quite a nautiloid, but it's a smaller little scout nautiloid ship. You have that. It's like the puddle jumpers.
In my head, it looks just like the Quinjet.
It was more like the puddle jumpers, more like a tube from Stargate Atlantis. But you guys hopped onto that. Sage was like, "I don't want to get in. I want to be on the roof with a longbow."
Yeah.
And as it rose up out of the courtyard, she's like, "Can I take a shot?" And I'm like, "You can." At this range, it's a disadvantage, even with a longbow, because he's already gotten hundreds of feet away. And she's like, "Fine." And I think she rolled one and missed. And then I counted up the next round to come around and how far he'd fly if he's dashing. And I'm like, he was 600 feet on the money away. I was counting up every turn. He was 600 feet. And I said it to her. I'm like, "Look, you're still at disadvantage. You can take another shot here, but if you miss this, that's it. He's out of range. You cannot get him." And she was like, "Okay." And she took the shot and she got him. And I'm like, you watch an arrow fly 600 feet, pierce him, and you watch him fall into the water. Now, I did this preemptively for the fight. I did cast Death Ward on him, and I actually sent him into the fight.
Fucker! Oh, I shouldn't be this angry. This happened like 40 years ago.
I did cast Death Ward on him, and I did it. He was quite weak the whole time you were firing arrows and stuff. But I cast Death Ward on him before the fight, and
that's why we never found the fucking sword. Oh my god!
Yeah, that's exactly why. Yeah. Because when you first met him, when the fight started, he was already down like whatever it is, like a 5th level spell slot or something like that. He was already marked down that. So then when you got him, I'm like, you see him fall into the water and splashed, and he disappears below the waves. And I think he flew down to try and see if you could see him, and I told him no, but I knew he had like swam away essentially, like really far. And you guys couldn't. And then, so after that, you guys, I turned to you, who's dead and has been dead for about 15-20 minutes.
Just quietly taking notes.
Yeah, and everybody else is like, again, like the whole time that Tara was firing at Garroth and stuff like that, you were like, she was looking at you like, "I'm going to get him for you, Martin. I'm going to get him for you."
Yeah.
And then the fight ends. He's supposedly dead, Death Ward. And I turn to you and I say, "You wake up." If you have the notes there, do you want to read?
Yeah, I do. Sorry, that's the other one. It's the party distraction. Eru opens his eyes, and all around him is blackness. A gargantuan eclipse sun hangs in the sky, and as Eru stares at it, 2 points of white light begin to approach at high speed. As it gets closer to Eru, more details come into focus. A heavily muscled dark form, 2 bright white angel wings, a hooded face masked in shadows, with burning points of light for eyes. This is Kurok.
But that was Kurok, the god of vengeance in that world we were playing before. He appeared to you, and he did some sort of monologue, like, he's like, "I was kind of like, I'm proud of you. You tried your best."
I actually have that as well.
Go, yeah. Sorry, yeah, knock stuff out, yeah.
He said, "In the time before my ascension, I too made many mistakes, and I too failed. What matters is that we learn from these mistakes and continue on."
And then he kind of put out a hand or I think he said something like to you, are you ready or something like that? Did he?
Yeah. Lawrence using continue on. Eru takes a deep breath and looks at the god he has devoted his life to and asks him to send him back. Kyorok tells Eru that life and death are not his domain and that if he sends him back, it would be breaking the highest law of the gods. Eru tells Kyorok that he made him an oath and that if he really is if there is really worse on the horizon, and if what Garroth has done will ripple through time, then Eru needs to be here to put a stop to it. Kyorok agrees and reaches out to Eru as the gods begin to seal Kyorok for breaking their laws. A spark of divine energy leaps from Kyorok's hand to Eru's, and Eru breathes once more.
Yeah. So so you were like, send me back. I made an oath that I'm going to enact vengeance on this guy. I'm not done. And he's like, look, like he was the god of vengeance. He was not the god of life and death. And he was like, I can do this, but I shouldn't because it is not my this is not my scope of support.
Yeah.
So
that's not my department, sir.
That's not my department. Let me refer to you to my colleague on this other team.
Please hold while I transfer.
Yeah. So he was like, look, I can do this. I shouldn't, and if I try, the others will stop me. And he means the other gods in the pantheon. And he's like a demigod. He's like not even like one of the high ups. He's like relatively low on the thing. But he's like, if I try this, they're gonna stop me. They're gonna try and stop me. And you were like, just do it. And then he tried to reach for you, and it was very much what's the pain? Yeah, with the two hands are just trying to touch, and like. He was being pulled away, and a huge wind was pulling you back. And I think I had you make a strength check to try and stretch and just touch his finger. And when you did, when the two of you touched, you just and you woke up on the floor of the little scout ship you guys had. And I said, you're alive. I think I made your hair snow white instead of black.
That's why in that one bit I read out when I was dying, there's a bit where you specifically say your black hair.
Yeah.
Because you want to. Also, hilariously enough. If I think that's not reversed for you, but death.
It's right. Fitting. But yeah, and you woke up, and then I said, right, you are alive again. And I turned to you and I said, here's the deal. Because your god, Kyorok, is now sealed away by the others for breaking one of the highest laws gods can break, you can no longer take any further levels in Paladin. And you were like, oh my god, okay. And then it was like, until you can find a way to either free your god or reconnect somehow, you cannot do that. Yeah. Oh, you're trying to put your thing back. For our audio listeners, Martin is struggling to put his notebook back into its place next to his bed.
I have like 3 sketch pads and 2 notebooks over there. The cap on Paladin levels was big.
Yeah, and I felt justified though. I felt like that's interesting, and I already knew. I think you were already telling me you wanted to take a couple levels in fight or something. Anyway,
yeah, I was thinking. My original plan was to go fighter champion and just build the most disgusting crit machine in the world.
Yeah, all those crit smites.
Because I had the vow of enmity from Vengeance Paladin just gives you advantage on something until you kill it. Permanent advantage and crits on 18, 19, and 20. Yes, please. I'll drop 5d8s on all of those.
Yeah. So yeah, that was it. And then you did eventually reconnect. You found it, and like one of the first cathedrals of Kyorok, and in there you found the Tears of Kyorok, which was you drank and then became partially godlike for a short time.
That was pretty sick.
And that reestablished Kyorok himself was not present, but the power of Kyorok was there, and I'm like, you can now take Paladin levels again, which was really, really cool. It was honestly that was probably, again, it was planned.
Yeah.
And I think it's perfectly fine to not obviously don't overplay it, because if you overplay it, then it's a case of players won't believe when you've actually killed them by accident with
you don't want to boy who cried wolf this, like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I think on rare occasion, I think it's actually fine to purposefully kill a player if you know that you're going. Like, I always planned that Martin will be sent back by his god to enact, like, kind of Gandalf style. You know, I've come back until my task is complete. So that kind of situation, and I planned that, and I knew that's what this was. And when I killed him, I did it purposefully. I built something way too powerful for him to face this level, and I massacred him specifically. I didn't fight anybody else. I think he threw a couple digs elsewhere, but primarily he was attacking you. And then but it actually made for, like, Eru's arc throughout that entire campaign is one of my favorites. It's
that stretch of story from from my death from the siege of my death all the way to when we did eventually get like from like siege of my death to traveling to the Feywild to find my warlock patron to getting back doing the time travel stuff and then eventually facing off with him at the end, like the whole like the army of paladins and clerics and everybody else with me.
You heard it right, folks. I did a time travel arc. I did 2 time travel arcs
Yes.
in my last campaign. I don't recommend it.
But I can honestly say that's probably probably my favorite experience playing D&D so far is that stretch from
I think Paladin's just unreal as well. Like you
Yeah.
can't knock that class, man. It's such a good all rounder. It's got utility spells, it's got healing spells. It doesn't have any. It has a few damaging spells actually as well, a handful.
hell yeah, it's got destructive wave.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You got
Destructive
healing
wave,
in your
oh,
lay on hands. The only thing it doesn't do, it's not particularly skilled. It doesn't have a lot of skill proficiencies, and it doesn't work as a ranged build either. Other than that, I mean, you got all the armor, you got lots of healing, lots of spells. You can be a frontline tank, you can be a kind of middle line healer. Yeah. Oh man, Paladins maybe the best class in the game. Like, if I'm thinking about it objectively,
Yeah.
maybe the most well-rounded class in the game.
Yeah, because you can literally basically do everything.
Yeah.
And particularly now that you have the optional class features where you can take some cleric cantrips and you can get like
You
can get
yeah,
sacred
exactly. You can
flames
take
and
a,
stuff.
and then that kind of actually fills out, not hugely, but it fills out your ability to be a ranged character as well. So honestly, Paladins, I think, I think maybe if you're like playing.
They're a great class to multi-class as well.
Yeah, because charisma is great to pair with sorcerer, warlock, bard, yeah, or strength with fighter,
Yeah.
strength not so much with barbarian, a little barbarian, but not terribly so.
Because you can't cast
You
when
can-
you're raging. Yeah.
You can't, but you can still do smites technically, and
Oh,
you can
yeah.
still do lay on hands. So also not terrible.
Oh yeah, sure.
yeah,
Don't mind like Arcan the Cruel is.
He's a
paladin.
barbarian paladin, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not the most optimal build,
But it's a fun build.
it's a fun build. Honestly, I think if you were ever like a first time player and you just wanted to get a feel for literally everything and all the mechanics there are, Paladin's the way to go.
Yeah, just don't do what I
again,
did. and
not so much
not
rogue,
realize
but
you can cast spells for 6 months. Just don't do that.
Martin was like level 5 before he realized that he got spells, like daily spells that were separate from the base. Once you get his Vengeance Paladin, Martin just thought that spell slots for smites and only smites.
It worked. It was working real well for me.
It was.
Yeah. But just to clarify something because you were asking about it. So when I did get killed, and I had no idea, I had no clue that it wasn't for real, like that I was coming back. Like I was like, shit, because it didn't feel like it was way beyond our capabilities. You know what I mean? It didn't feel. You know, there's a very specific feeling to a supposed to lose fight. Sekiro, the very first boss fight in Sekiro, if for anyone who's played that listening, that has a very like as soon as you get out there, you see this giant fucker with a huge. He's got a sword. He looks awesome. He's got this giant longbow strapped to his back, and then like you were literally just after pulling yourself out of a well and just got your sword back, and he's like, and there's this like picturesque samurai warlord standing in a waving field of grass, and I was like, I'm dead. I'm dead here. And then I started fighting. I was like, tried to block one thing and immediately got destroyed, and I was like, yeah, no, this is way out of my depth. But with him, I was like, I felt like I was like. Just at the cusp of not possible, which is so like, you know, like it felt like it was as far as I could possibly stretch myself on my best day is the way I would put it. So like felt like it was in grasp, like if we were just lucky enough we could do it, which is really good, which is also why I bought it when I bit the dirt like but yeah, I remember just being like fuck.
I think you're absolutely right in terms, from my perspective being behind the screen. I remember in that fight, a few things happened, right? That made it so that you did end up losing. Because again, I built something that I'm like, oh, he'll be way overpowered, and I made him cast Death Ward on himself at the start of the day, so I'm giving him even more survivability. A couple things happened. One, you guys split the party.
Yes.
So some of you went to the coast to defend the village, and some of you stayed in the cathedral. And I ran 2 fights there, and that was really fun, and it went well. But it meant that when Gareth finally showed up in the village, there was only 3 of you there to face him. And you did, and the second thing that happened is before he showed up in the village, I had a wave of ghouls and stuff like that show up.
And
And
they
despite you guys
wrecked
being,
us.
yeah, I mean, like you guys were level 9 or
I
something
want to
maybe.
say
You were
9, yeah.
you were because you were just back from the Underdark, so like 8 or 9 or something like that, yeah. And I put you up against a bunch of ghouls, and it wasn't even like a crazy number. It was like maybe like 5 or 6 of them. Um, and I put you up against them, and like you were rolling so badly to hit, and on the saves against the paralysis and stuff like that, and a bunch of stuff like that, and just that fight went on. My plan is I'll send in these ghouls. They'll burn a couple smites, they'll burn a couple key points, whatever, and then I'll send in the big guns. When actually you guys spent way more time on those guys than I thought you would, and then when you did manage to kill them, then I sent in, but I'm like they've already taken way more hits than I thought they would. And then like the third thing I suppose is that the fight took place over a long distance between the village and the cathedral, which is further inland. Um, and there was a whole thing where like you had fly speed, so
Yeah.
you could fly that quite quickly. Sage was a monk, so she could run, but she was still running over land to try and get there. And Dan was a druid, sorry, a rogue, and he had double dash as a bonus action, so he was also moving quite fast. But it took them a long time to catch up to you when you had a fly speed of 60 feet, whatever it was, and you could dash for 120.
I was hasted as well.
You are, yes, you were, yeah. So you kept up with Gareth immensely fast. But then I think what I did when he actually fled is I think he dimension door that gave him a 400 foot advantage immediately.
Vengeance Paladins get Dimension Door as part of their last set of oath spells.
Yeah. And he teleported there 400 feet. He already has a 400 foot lead on you. You're hasted, so you are catching up, but he's also dashing back to the castle and stuff like that, to the cathedral. And like honestly, like I said, when it came to the end of the fight, when you actually died, he was kind of on death's door, and that's why he fled. And then it only took one arrow, and I'm looking at this. I'm looking at. I forget how much it was. It was like single digits, and I'm looking at this, and I'm like, if she hits him, he's going down.
Yeah.
And I was like, look, it's disadvantage because you're long range, your bow, and all this other stuff. Yeah. Honestly, one of the better. Just a great arc overall. I think Eru's arc overall in Campaign 1 was fantastic. But
Really
I
fun.
think that, yeah, I think there was also, I think that particular, I think that happened over the course of a single session, because I think he arrived
Yeah.
and you did all that, all the talking stuff, and then the very next, you decided you're going to split the party, and then the next session I was like, cool, I will do 2 battle maps, and I will put you here. I'm going to run them both simultaneously.
That sounds
Uh,
good.
and it was that we did that fight, and we did the follow-up chase to the cathedral, and we did Garrett's dead, and we did you flying off, and all the stuff with you being resurrected and all that all took place in one session, and it was probably one of the top sessions we've ever had.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Like I'm naturally unbiased because it was my character and it was dope. But yeah, that, and yeah, I'm a sucker for big, like, the army of good guys has come along to take down the Dark Lord shit from like it basically the Battle of Pelennor Fields, and like the Charger of Rohirrim and all that stuff in like Lord of the Rings. So like I particularly also loved when we did eventually conclude that with the big army and like gathering everybody and then like fighting in the tower and the tower coming down and escaping from the falling tower after we killed the Atropel. Because I killed him above the tower, then the tower started collapsing, and then we had to go and kill the Atropel. And
In the basement.
yeah, and then the
Yeah.
Atropel knocked me unconscious. The guys just pulled me out. Mike severed the cord so that we could actually heal again. The guys brought me back to life. I think I had like 5 hit points, and I just ran in and smashed it with a great sword and killed it. And I was like, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
There was also there was a very Pelennor Fields-esque moment where you guys were infiltrating that tower, that black tower, that basically in the few years you'd been gone to the Feywild after your resurrection, and again you were gone for like 3 days, but it turned out to be 3 years when you got back.
Feywild,
A
folks.
schism, like a rift had torn open in the earth, like a huge ravine, and it stretched for hundreds of miles. And out of it, a tower a black tower had risen, and you guys were infiltrating that. And at the same time you were doing that, kind of Aragorn at the Black Gate style, all the other paladins and clerics from all the other orders and the army and a couple different kingdoms had banded together, and they're like, we're going to attack from the eastern front, throw out as many of their forces as we can. You guys go in behind, and your job is to take out the two. The General Core was the
Generally Gore.
oh, it might have been Gore.
Yeah.
Was the Death Tyrant,
Yeah.
and then he was breeding the Atropol as another undead creature, and then you fought some corrupted angels along with Gareth at the top of the tower, and then the Death Tyrant and stuff below the tower, and the whole thing collapsed. But I described it as them all standing on a hilltop with the armies of the undead, kind of like snarling at them and stuff like that, and kind of almost like Jedi style, just a line of paladins came out and just kind of like lit up their swords with their smites and kind of charged into the fray and stuff like that, and it was really cool.
I'm a sucker for that stuff. I really am. I think it's because I saw like the thing that got me into Lord of the Rings. I saw the Two Towers and I was like 8, and that was my first ever exposure to Lord of the Rings. So my first exposure to Lord of the Rings was Helm's Deep, and I was like, and now 20 years later, it's inked onto my skin.
Yeah, I think, like I said, when it comes to character death, sometimes it happens accidentally,
Yes.
like it did with Wabu and stuff, and sometimes it's up to the players to bring that person back. They need to find a cleric or whatever, or they need to earn the money to do so. Sometimes it's up to the DM can put opportunities in front of the players as well, like when I'm like, oh look, here's a Lazarus Pit, nothing can go wrong there.
I'd read too many Batman comics, Connor. I'm sorry.
I should have been like, oh, it's a pool of crystal clear water, and it's called the Schmazarus Pit.
Yeah. It's...
It looks very refreshing. Maybe you should wash his body or something. But yeah, and I guess other times then I think it is, if it's traumatic and if it's interesting, and if it sometimes I think it's okay to rattle your players a little bit if you know that they're actually not in danger. I like when I killed you again, you're like, that's my character gone, but like I know that it's not. I know that I'm going to tell you in a few minutes time, and just let you sweat it for a little bit.
Yeah, and at the same time I was kind of like, yeah, well, you know, there's just like, look, it's shit, but I can't really complain about it. Like I feel like, I felt shit because like I was like, I really like that character, and I just remember being like, but I suppose like if you had to go, like that's probably, yeah, I guess that's the best way it could have gone. And like I was just like, oh shit. And then I remember I was like trying to think of like what I play next. I think I was actually on like, will I just play Lug?
Yeah.
Which is hilarious. But yeah, no, like it didn't feel cheap. That's the thing you never want. If someone dies, you never wanted to feel cheap. You never wanted to feel like they didn't have a choice, and that wasn't like, you never wanted, like, because you didn't give me a choice in the other one really, but like more so, like you didn't give me a choice, but that still felt justified because the way it was built and the whole framing of it and everything. And like I said, it felt like it was just beyond me, so it felt like that I was just not, just luck wasn't with me rather than anything you had done. And I think that's what you gotta aim for, because you don't ever want anyone to feel like you're like picking on them or like that, like,
yeah, of course, yeah,
or or like anything like that. Yeah,
or that you're trying to kill their character but with like malicious intent. I was trying to kill your character, but for a dramatic thing, and I wouldn't actually leave them dead. That was for dramatic purposes. But I mean, if you're actually trying to kill, like if you don't like a character a player is playing or something like that, and you're trying to actively kill them,
that's a dick move.
No, that's a massive red flag right there.
Please stop playing D&D.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned something there about like it feeling earned, it feeling right and dramatic, and kind of the scene made it feel justified.
It was an appropriate end to the story we were telling.
When it comes to that, can be the same when it comes to NPC deaths as well, because NPC deaths can be dramatic and they can be sad. Particularly, oftentimes DMs might throw in a funny, silly character or someone who they just enjoy, they have good back and forth with, and they become friends of the party and stuff like that. And if a person like that dies, it's actually quite sad. It's not quite as sad as a player character death, but it's still like, oh, we liked that character, we liked that person. Can you think of any times that either in our games or in your own game or anything like that, that a person has died in a campaign that felt earned. It felt like this character died. I'm not fishing for one particular. I know what you're thinking of now, and I'm not fishing for that one. But no, I'm thinking like, are you thinking of any characters that maybe have died or whatever?
I'm sorry, my brain is just full of that Modron that died.
Oh, that's where you went. Okay.
I just because as soon as you said it, all like you think of was Jeremy. He died. We had this Modron called, what was he called? Clip Clop or something?
No, I think you called him. Oh my god! What did you call him?
I definitely have the. Do you know what? No,
that's early. No, you'll be a while looking for that. That is early campaign 1.
But he
that's
came back
level 5, pre-level 5.
He's the one who warned us late game that the Clockwork Man had become the new Primus on Mechanus. Yeah, he was, because he came back from Mechanus and like warned us that was happening. Then turned into dust on the spot. And then it was horrible because we all really liked him because he was the one who he nearly got one of our characters arrested because one of our characters was like, this is our house, protect the house. So he started shooting arrows at anyone that came near the house. So
he was just like the last. You were like,
keep talking. I'm going to find that.
Okay. So what happened was, my first campaign was very Modron and Mechanus heavy and stuff like that because there was a lot of constructs and the Clockwork Man was like a construct person, or he built himself a robot body. So the guys interacted with Modrons a fair amount early on. This Clockwork Man had been studying Modrons, and then they found one of them trapped in the lab, and they were trying to figure out a way that they could send him home. Now, early on, Mike, as Mike does, read all the rules of D&D. And basically found that if he casts banishment on this Modron and just concentrate on it for the full minute, he'll be sent back to his home plane and he'll stay there permanently if he let the spell finish out. And that was his plan for a very long time. He's like, hey, look, I want this guy to go home to his people. I'll just banish him and I'll just hold the spell until he'll be gone. And I'm like, that's actually a great idea. What happened was you guys left him in your house in a city called Murderstone.
Yes.
Don't let the name scare you. It's not all Murderstone. I make that joke every time and I don't care. But he then went off and did like years of other quests and loads of other stuff, and you went all over the place. And then when you finally came back, the very last thing you said to him was, Mike turned to him and he said, "Hey, while we're gone, look after the house and defend it from anyone, okay?" And he just like saluted, and he's like because I think he had gotten the impression, he's like, I'm a Modron, I don't know how to be without a Primus. While I'm here, will you be my Primus? And then Mike was like, I'll be your Primus. Yeah, you can just do what I say, and then you'll feel like you have a sense of purpose or whatever. And Mike told him, hey, guard the house, don't let anyone in, all right? And he was like, yes, sir. And then he perched up for months in game, like months of in-game time, with a bow and arrow, and like the mailman would come by and drop off the newspaper, and he'd take a shot at the mailman with an arrow, and then like people would come by, like the city guards. I think when you finally went back, this little alleyway the house was in had been cordoned off. The police had barricades set up, like the police, the town watch.
Yeah.
And they had like a position. It was like they were like dealing with like an active shooter situation. And he was just in the window, and he's like, I must defend this for the Primus. And all the town guards are like, there's this insane little like metal robot creature up there, and he keeps shooting at people. We haven't been able to get into the house to stop him. And you guys showed up, and you were like, ooh, sorry, that might be on us. His name was like, I can't remember his name.
I just remember when he died, it was like it was Control Alt Grief.
I remember we sat there for a month. We were all very upset by it because, again, so that happened. We sent him home, and then he showed up one day, months and months later.
Ashes to ashes, bleeps to bloops. His name was...
Oh my god.
I keep wanting to say Claptrap because I think it was something like that.
Control Alt Mourn.
Yes, Control Alt Mourn. Oh my god, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Jesus.
It wasn't. It was Control Alt. It was Control Alt Weep and then Alt F Mourn.
Alt F Mourn.
Yeah.
So he showed up like towards the end of the campaign because he had been tied in with the big bad, the Clockwork Man.
Yeah.
And he shows up, with a warning, and he's like, "Hey, I'm here to warn you. The Clockwork Man, the guy you're looking for, he's become the new Primus. He's supplanted the Primus, and now he's like building an army of robots that he plans to invade the entire material plane with." And you guys were like, "Holy hell, that's insane!" we need to do this. And he's like, yeah. I think he said something like you'd have to find your notes on this at some point. I think he said something like the Primus doesn't know I'm here, as in referring to the Clockwork Man. I've come here to warn you, and you have to stop him. And then there was this whole thing where like you guys are like, okay, we'll do that. And then I think I had him say something sweet or funny or cute, and then I think I had him go like, oh no, he knows I'm here. And then he just pop, turned to dust.
Yeah.
Because the Primus controls all the Modrons below him. And the Clockwork Man just killed him again. But I mean, like, I think that was very sad. I don't know. That one borders, in my head, that one borders a little bit on being unceremonious because it was so blunt. It just happened he's died then and there.
I remember feeling it. Like, we were making jokes and stuff, but all of us were legitimately like, man, we missed him. Like, he was cool.
Yeah.
He was cool. Like, because I remember
Hubert. His name was Hubert.
Hubert. Yes. Oh my God. It was Hubert, and Mike had to cast he had to cast tongues to himself every time to communicate him, and he said it sounded like beatboxing.
When they spoke to each other, it sounded like they were beatboxing. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, Hubert. And the thing is, I'm pretty sure I told you.
What an NPC.
I think I told you guys when you finally defeated or when you finally confronted the Clockwork Man, he was expecting you you went to Mechanus and to fight him, and he was expecting you
on the back of his ancient copper dragon, by the way.
And you like arrived, and he was like, "Oh, good, you're here. I see you got my message." And you were like, "My message." Your message, and he was like, yes, I sent that Modron to I like because again he can't not obey his Primus.
Yeah.
So when he showed up, he had no choice but to completely obey what the Clockwork Man wanted, and the Clockwork Man said, here, go deliver this message, tell them exactly what I'm telling you now, and that's that. And he and tell them that the Clockwork Man doesn't know that you're coming, that you're doing this secretly for them or something. And he told them all of that. And then again, Hubert has no choice but to obey his Primus. So he comes back to the Imperial plane. He warns you. And then as soon as the Clockwork Man, like, because he knows what he knows, as soon as the Clockwork Man is like, oh good, he's told them, he's just like, dead. I have no use for this guy anymore.
Yeah. Oh, that. Yeah. Oh man, fuck Hubert. God damn it.
Hubert was great.
Oh, definitely.
One character actually. Okay, actually, I have an example of when I killed someone off screen. Actually, wasn't particularly. It wasn't particularly earned, but it was a quest that chugged on without you guys.
Dane.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've gone heavy with the in jokes from our first campaign in this episode.
That stuck for a while, because it was like, what's your name? It's like, my name is Dane. It's like, Dane what? It's just Dane. Dane, just Dane? Okay, and then that stuck for like 3 years.
He became a king.
He did. That's why he was like, oh, it's just Dane, because he doesn't want to let you know he's a king.
No, I mean, he became king, Dane, just Dane.
He was basically like a sort of an Aragorn type. He was kind of an estranged prince.
Yeah.
And you guys helped him defend his home city. His dad was on death's door, the king. And it was a case of like, all right, well, his dad was being haunted by a Heim, if you're familiar with The Witcher. Yeah. Heims are like grieve demons, and they make you depressed and self-loathing and sorrowful, and then they feed off of it. And it was latched onto him, not physically, it was just kind of in him, possessing him. And the king had not been well for a long time, so when the king died then, and Dane was upset about his father's death, the Heim was like, ooh, more depression, more grief, and then latched onto Dane. And you guys kind of twigged something was going on there at the time, but we never came back to it. Had you come back to it, you would have realized that Dane was way worse than when you left him.
I think we were planning on coming back to it, because I remember I did detect a demon when I was in there. I did like a divine sense, and I detected a demon, and I think it was right in the middle of when we were like doing the Feywild stuff or something, or like we were on the way, and that came in, and we were like, right, we'll get back to that later. And then we did the Feywild, and then we time traveled 3 years into the future and had bigger problems.
Yeah, and in that 3 years, the Heim had grown to like immense power, and had basically there was before Breath of the Wild was ever a thing. There was a Calamity Ganon in Hyrule Castle situation going on in Pentamere, in the kingdom that Dane was the king of, and he was trapped in there being possessed, and his grief was just fueling all of this. And I had an idea that like if he ever went back there, there'd be a mission to infiltrate the demon infested castle, get to Dane, kill the Heim, and then save him potentially. And you guys could have done that, but then of course the time travel thing happened, the time dilation, and then you guys were like 3 years has gone by, and there was a different group in it that I had that was based off of Red Riding Hood. So I had a woman named Redna,
Yeah.
and Redna was Red Riding Hood, and she was an early version of a blood hunter, I believe.
She was.
And she had the lycanthrope subclass and all that. So that I tweaked the story so that she had been bitten by this wolf that was trying to kill her grandmother. And that wolf was no normal wolf; it was a werewolf, and she killed it. And then she kind of went into the profession of hunting monsters and werewolves and all that. So that, I named her Redna, and she led a group of people called the
Red
Hoods. They had a few different. They're the Red Riders, the Red Hoods, but the Red Hoods was like their main name. And they were based off of her. They were based off of Red Riding Hood, and she was there. Canonically, what I had happen is that she and her people were called there because they're like a roving band of monster hunting mercenaries. And they were called there by the kingdom, like, you guys are the most equipped to deal with monsters and demons and such. And they did, but Dane did not survive the process because in my head, I'm like, they're not as capable as you guys are as players. So they did get rid of the demon and all that stuff, and the city is safe. But unfortunately, Dane does not survive the process. So the monarchy fell apart, and now other people took over as council members that ruled the city and all that jazz.
Yeah. That was
Which I feel like that was kind of a bit unceremonious. That was a little bit it was a bit underwhelming because I'm like, oh, by the way, as like a footnote, Dane died because so much time passed and all that kind of stuff. And to me, I mean, for me, it felt right in the sense that 3 years passed. I don't know how long I can realistically be like, hey, there's a demon infesting this guy and it's getting worse by the day. But yeah, 3 years is fine just to kind of. Yeah, you can go back in 10 years, he'll still be there. It felt like that had to progress in the back of my head. But again, I felt like it was a missed opportunity. If you ever played any video games, and not many video games do it, but some video games have time constraints with certain missions. And if you've ever played a video game like that where it's like, here's a mission, go do it, but you only have X amount of time to do it, and then you end up not being able to complete the mission.
Yeah.
And you feel like you've missed out as a result. I feel like that's kind of what I created there, which I wasn't super proud of.
Well, no, I didn't like trying to think back to how I do remember being like, shit, that happened. Like, but I think the way you described it, or at least laid it out, was this is what happened as a consequence of the 3 years you've been gone. It was like, this has happened. Dane is now dead, and the Clockwork Man has raised an army in this giant spire in this fissure up in the north is going on, and like it did feel like obviously impactful of what happened, because like it's like another layer of like, this is how fucked the world is without all of you guys in it for 3 years. Like one of your best friends has died, his kingdom has fallen into ruin. Like there's like undead roaming everywhere, there's demons in this, like it felt like very much like this is a part of like the terrible world that now exists because you weren't able to intervene. And like, so I totally see what you're saying about like kind of off screen and someone, but like I still think like it did. I still think it hit like had a good effect, or hit like had at least some partially hit the desired outcome. Just because it did feel impactful, like, because like still you killed off an NPC even though it was off screen and we didn't see it and we didn't interact with it. Still, to get the news to like, oh yeah, this NPC you guys like spent like, I don't know, like 2 months playing with, dead,
pretty close
gone,
to, yeah.
Donezo. And like, as well, because we had that running joke of Dane, like that, it was like, because we had like, I suppose because it was felt like it was more integrated, he was more integrated into the campaign, that still hit, like, for me anyway. For me, I know I felt like it still hit. But yeah, I can totally see what you mean by like off screen and someone, obviously, because, and some, you're just gonna have to do that when you just have to literally jump forward 3 years.
Yeah, I guess so. It was. So you're saying it's kind of like it felt like it worked because it felt like it was a direct consequence of you guys being in the Feywild for so long.
Yeah. Like I at least I know this is going back literally like 4 years probably at this point. Like from what I remember of it, like I remember you being like we got out and like found out about all the bad shit that had happened, and like, oh, and like Osilia's king passed away, and we were like, sorry, what? And you were like, Dane's dead, and we were like, fuck, I've said fuck a lot this
It's
this
cracked,
podcast.
sure.
Yeah, but I do feel like it still hit, but I absolutely like it. Definitely would have hit harder if we were there with the red hoods and we were there when whatever happened went down, and like Dane couldn't just his body couldn't sustain it, his body gave out and he died, and like we were there to witness that. Then obviously that's going to be more impactful. It's going to leave a bigger mark. But even though we couldn't be there because of the time travel situation, I still feel like when you come back from time travel, you're like, oh god, what's gone wrong, what's gone wrong, what's gone wrong, and you're like,
Yeah.
this is all bad, and one of your favorite NPCs is dead. You're like, shit.
I suppose it's do you know what? Maybe I guess it's like an inherent part of D&D, because with most open world RPG video games or whatever, there's no. I mean, like they'll act like there's a time frame. You know, oh my daughter's been kidnapped by orcs and taken into the hills, and like cool. I'm gonna wait until I'm level 40 and come back and do that.
Yeah.
And you'll go back to him and he's like, have you found my daughter yet?
Yeah.
Like you haven't been gone for like 60 hours of gameplay or whatever. And you're like, no, not yet. I'll go do it now. He's like, yes, please. She's in danger. I'm like, she's been in danger for some time, sir. I think it will hold.
Honestly, just give up. She's not coming back.
But then you can go and you'll rescue her, and despite the fact that it took you whatever hundreds of in-game days, he'll go, thank you so much for rescuing my daughter, and you're like, yeah, you look entirely different. I'm 40 levels higher. Remember last time when I had leather armor? This is dragon scale. That's how long it's been.
I'm riding a skeleton horse.
Exactly, yeah. I'm riding a skeleton horse. This bow does like, I don't know, god level damage. So, those goblins, they were easy. Those orcs, I killed them, no problem.
Oh god,
it's like I think it's an inherent thing when you play D&D. And I think we saw it, honestly. I saw someone call this out recently. Not someone call out, but just indicate it. When it came to like campaign 2 of Critical Role, there was a lot of threads that, particularly if you watch the wrap-up video, Matt talks about threads that could have been followed, that could have led to X, Y, and Z, that weren't. And I did feel that if you look at campaign 1 and campaign 2 as a whole, campaign 1 had a lot more, I don't want to say linear, because they definitely had a lot of different options and did lots of different stuff, but it felt like the what they wanted to do, or they knew what they wanted to do in campaign 1 way more. There was a lot more of a divided opinion in campaign 2, which sometimes meant, oh, we're going to do this now. Okay, what do we do next? This sounds good. And they'll just bounce around an awful lot. And I don't get me wrong, still super enjoyable. Really enjoy campaign 2. But I think that's kind of one of the inherent things, is particularly if you go with a more sandboxy game, the more options you give players, the realistically that the less they're going to get done, if that makes sense. Like if you give someone 3 options, they're going to pick one of those options, and that's grand, you know. And then they're only missing out on 2 things. But if you give someone 10 options and they only pick one of them, because they can only do one thing at a time, then they're missing out on 9 things. And I feel like it's just an inherent part of the game.
Kind of how I operate my world anyway. Is like, because like now whenever my guys finish a big arc, what I do is I go, right, like unless they have specifically gone out and looked for new information, I was like, this is the information you've had since the start of this arc. All this info is probably about 3 months old at this stage. These are things you know that are happening in this country you're in, and any info you have from any other sources. And go, but these are, as far as you know, what the major plots that are going on in each of the areas you could potentially go to, and they can go anywhere now because they have transport via plants. So like, Joe, it literally goes like, I give him like a list of 8 like small paragraphs with like just like the outline and sort of hints as to what's going on. Some of them are more direct, but yeah, and like. They're now in like at the start of another arc, because they did a previous arc now, my Greek Roman place has fallen to the god of darkness.
Yeah, okay, so you would handle it very much how I would, where if I go, here's a bunch of choices, you can go off and do this thing or that thing, and they go, let's go to option 1. I'm like, cool. Option 2 and 3, and I'm thinking to myself, I know what's going on there. I know the quests that are happening. Those things are going to escalate and progress further as a result of you guys not being around. And you know, like maybe I thought, oh, things will be relatively stable and you can jump on here, but now it's like, no, the bad guy, like you said, the bad guys have a foothold now, and that's a much tougher situation you're going to have to resolve. As a result, and it's not like you're punishing people, but it's like I think it indicates a more living world. If you can do that,
it makes the threat more real as well, because because the way I have it set up is they're aware of the big bad now, and they know what he's at. They kind of know what he's after. They don't really know what he's after, but they kind of know what he's after. And they've had a few confrontations now to where they're kind of they've built a relationship with this entity, for lack of a better term. And like, I don't want that. Like, this is the thing they're going to fight at the end of the campaign. This is what's going to be the end. This is probably the last memory they'll have of this campaign. I want to build that appropriately, and to do that, I cannot in good faith and in logically speaking, in terms of good storytelling practice, have him not do anything while my guys spend 3-4 weeks, a month, 2 months somewhere else doing something. And like, they're getting good stuff done. What they're doing isn't inconsequential. It's actually very important. But it's just by nature of, like, you cannot be everywhere at all times, and things will progress without you. And I tell them that every time I give them the plotline. And like, they went straight into this arc now because they have to. Because the last arc they did in this arc, they did their backstory arc for 2 players, but their hometowns were directly affected by the events of the arc. So straight away they went into it. Although Mike did delay his for an arc because he wanted to be a pirate.
He wants to be a pirate, yeah.
And there were consequences for that. Yeah, giants invaded his village specifically because of that.
Yeah.
So like, you know, that's the kind of way to, and same with like death. So like, yeah, like, I think with the Dane thing, I think just to feel like you're saying, like a living, breathing, real world that isn't just somewhere where like the dude's waiting 40 years for you to rescue his 6-year-old daughter. Like,
yeah.
You know, you don't want that situation in a D&D world. You want it to feel lived in, real and breathing. And I think I wouldn't argue. I think you did it the best way you could, given what you had to do because of the because of the
unpredictable time travel role.
Because of the unpredictable nature of time travel and the fact, and like, that's what that it wasn't. You didn't set up the time travel. You just had to deal with it.
Yeah, I suppose that's fair. That's fair. We are as dungeon masters, just as much as players, we are at the mercy of the dice as well.
Oh God. Yes.
But Martin.
Yes, Connor.
That's all the time we have for today.
Ooh, it's been a good one, even though we've been talking about generally. I didn't think I'd laugh this much in the death episode, to be honest. But good old Qbert. Good old Qbert. Oh, God.
If you have any questions you'd like us to ask, stories you'd like us to share, or topics you'd like us to cover, please tweet us at MicFlayersPod on Twitter. You'll find that on the lower screen. You can also find our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor Breaker, and Radio Republic. Martin, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me mostly on the Micflayers podcast. You can find me on Twitter at So Sorry It's Over, which is in the bottom right-hand corner of my screen. Boop, right there. You can also find me on the Micflayers podcast Twitter account, which is at MicFlayersPod, also in the bottom right-hand corner. I'm usually on there a lot. So occasionally I'm also on Twitch, which is linked in our description. It's twitch.tv/Mert. But mainly and primarily, you can find me here every Friday, 6 p.m. on the Micflayers podcast. Where can the fine folks listening find you, Connor?
People can find me on Twitter at 0.Conor, ZeroPointConor, 1 N, very important. And as Martin said, we're in time there, nice. As Martin said, every Friday at 6 p.m. Irish time here on the Micflayers podcast on all the aforementioned platforms. So guys, thank you so much for joining us. This was the episode on death. I hope it wasn't too depressing. We laughed a lot, so I hope you did too. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you all next time.
And don't forget,
folks.
all death mourn.